Hello there fellow gamers, my name is Ashes and I welcome you all to the channel. Now just a quick one before we start the reading. After this clip it's going to be it's not going to be any picture, it's just going to be a black screen because this video I've got my mic plugged into my phone, so you're going to hear me a lot better. It's going to be a better sound while I'm reading, but the phone's going to be facing down filming the ground, so it's just going to be a black screen. So it's going to be like an audio thing. Maybe it might be better. Let me know what you think in the comments. But yeah, let's get to the reading.
July 5th, 1977, Brooklyn, New York. Hopper was only vaguely aware of Delgado's arrival, but the heavy thud of her bag as it hit her desk brought him back to the room after being lost in casework for who knew how long. He looked up at his partner, still standing behind her desk, unbuttoned the top 3 buttons of her green blouse and began fanning herself with a manila folder. Not even 8, and it was already pushing 90 outside. Inside, the mercury felt like it was at least 10 degrees higher still. "You're an early," said Delgado. "You're telling me you can sleep in this heat? I'm from Cuba. This is nothing." "No. You're from Queens, and even for Queens, this is something." Delgado laughed and put the folder down, picking up her mug. "Coffee? Now you really are joking." Delgado put one hand on her hip. "One, you should know me well enough by now to know I don't make any attempts at humour before dinner. And 2, you look like you need to inject it into your vein rather than drink it. And 3, it's hot and you like to talk to yourself to prove your self-worth and your right to be a homicide detective." One of Delgado's eyebrows went up, along with one corner of her mouth. "You are the king of the jackasses, you know that, right?" Hopper leaned back. "It has been mentioned upon occasion." He smiled, and after a moment Delgado sighed and shook her head. 6 weeks of being partners and they'd fallen into a routine that, he had to admit, he loved. He hadn't realised what he'd been missing for so long. While Stafford had technically been his partner, they'd never hit it off. Stafford may have been a good cop once, but Hopper suspected that had probably been around the time Paul Revere had ridden to warn that the British were coming. Rosario Delgado was a real partner, dedicated, capable, and someone he could trust with his life. "It's hot, and?" he asked. "And," said Delgado, "drinking a hot drink in hot weather will cool you right down." Hopper frowned. "I'm not sure that's true." "Hey, listen to Mr. Indiana Education here. I might be from Queens, but I know a thing or two about Cuba and coffee." Hopper stood. Delgado waved him away. "Sit down. I can get the damn coffee and still be a homicide detective. Besides, you were deep in thought, and I know how long it takes to warm up those brain cells of yours." Hopper handed his mug over and Delgado stalked off to the coffee room without another word. Hopper watched her for a moment, then sat and returned his attention to the files laid out on the desk. They were a series of crime scene photos, 3 large prints, all black and white, laid out side by side across the centre of his desk. Around them were smaller prints, showing the same scenes from different angles. Across the bottom, Hopper had lined up 3 plastic evidence bags corresponding to each scene. 3 scenes, 3 bags. 3 white rectangular cards, blank on one side, a different symbol drawn on each in black on the other side. Victim 1, Jonathan Schwarzenegger, white, male, 22, hollow circle. Victim 2, Sam Barrett, white, male, 50, cross. And from yesterday, victim 3, Jacob Holler, white, male, 30, 3 wavy lines. Hopper rolled his neck and began adjusting the layout of the cards and photographs on his desk, shuffling them a little but keeping everything aligned while he let his brain work on the problem. One thing was for sure: when Captain Lavorgner handed the first case to him and Delgado, on Delgado's first day as a homicide detective, no less, he'd been right when he'd said it was weird. One ritual killing had turned into 2, had turned into 3. There was no connection between the victims that he or Delgado had been able to find. All seemed like average citizens, whatever average meant in New York City. About the only thing they had in common was that none of them had families or partners, at least none that the detectives have been able to trace. That, and, of course, the manner of their deaths. Each one stabbed with a blade of 4 to 6 inches in length, as measured at autopsy. And each one stabbed 5 times in a distinctive and deliberate pattern. Any one of them wounds would have been enough to cause death. And while 5 was certainly overkill, it was actually relatively restrained. In his time as an NYC cop, Hopper had seen victims stabbed 30, 50, 100 times, the attacker driven into a frenzy by drugs or depression or mental illness or a combination thereof. Here there was a precision, not least of all because the wounds were carefully positioned to form the distinctive shape of an inverted 5-pointed star. "Coffee?" said Delgado, placing Hopper's mug on the edge of his desk. "I can't make any promises for the flavour, but I can promise you it's hot." She moved around to stand beside her partner, looking down at the spread of photos as she sipped from her own mug. "This really is something else, right?" Hopper rubbed his jaw and reached for his coffee. "Ain't that the truth?" "No leaks yet?" He shook his head. "Well, that's something," said Delgado, and she was right. The previous summer, 2 Bronx teens, Donna Lauria and Jody Valenti, had been shot as they sat in Jody's car. Jody survived, Donna did not. Since then, 5 more victims had been claimed. The most recent less than 2 weeks ago, with the killer writing to not only an NYPD captain, but just a few weeks ago to the Daily News, signing off both letters with a bizarre nom de plume. Despite himself, Hopper felt his gaze drawn over to Harris's desk. The detective hadn't yet returned, and the homicide sign he'd made was clearly visible. Sitting beside his old Smith Corona typewriter, it was a macabre, but perhaps necessary, reminder of the evil that still lurked in the city. It has been 9 days since the son of Sam last struck. Since the first murders, New York had become obsessed with its very own serial killer, son of Sam, dominating the news for weeks, months, at least when the media wasn't wrestling with the city's ongoing monetary problems, or the chaotic free-for-all that was the race for the mayor's job. The election, perhaps the most important for a generation of New Yorkers, loomed just 4 short months away. And now, with son of Sam no closer to being caught, it seemed there was another serial killer at work. Right from the discovery of the first victim, Hopper and Delgado had both come to the same conclusion. This case had to be kept under wraps, for now at least. Captain Lavogna had readily agreed. Son of Sam was enough. There was no telling how the public would react if a second serial killer was added to the 6 o'clock news. At least it doesn't look like we've got a copycat, said Hopper. Or Pepper's not taking any clues from son of Sam. He hadn't tried to contact the authorities. He leaned over the photographs. And the ritualistic nature of the killings is different. Obviously, said Delgado, sitting at a desk and drinking a coffee. No, I mean, they're not doing it for publicity or for the attention. In fact, I'm not even sure they're doing it for the murders. Delgado frowned. That coffee too hot for your brain, detective? You kill someone with a knife, you tend to be doing it for the murders. He sure as hell ain't robbing the victims. But that's just it, said Hopper. Hear me out. They're not robberies, they're homicides, yes? But maybe that's not what's driving them. I don't follow this. Hopper picked up one of the crime scene photographs and passed it to his partner. Look at the scenes. These are ritualistic murders. The victims killed in a very specific way. Each scene then marked with a symbol. Nothing else is touched. That has a meaning in and of itself. So, what if the killer isn't doing it for attention? He hasn't read about Son of Sam, and he thinks he can do one better. He's following his own purpose. Attention and publicity is an irrelevance. Blimey. Delgado put the photograph down and looked at Hopper as he leaned back in her chair. She swung her feet up onto the corner of her desk, showing Hopper the soles of her square-heeled boots. So you're saying the cards he's leaving, they're not for us? He's not trying to give us a message? Hopper shook his head. Nope. The pattern of the stab wounds, the cutting, the cards, they have meaning, but they're not designed to tell us anything. So what? It's a nice theory, but it doesn't help us much. So he's not trying to leave us a message. So he's a frigging mental case. Tell me something I don't know. Hopper sighed. He looked across the evidence bags at the cards. His eyes settled on the one they had found yesterday. 3 wavy lines. These mean something to the killer. If we can figure out what, maybe we can figure out the why. Leading us to the who, said Delgado. But these cards have given us nothing, Hopper. No fingerprints. White cards you can buy anywhere. Acrylic ink you can buy in relatively fewer places, if you count every single arts supply store in the city as relatively fewer. That was when Captain Lavogner emerged from his office. Hopper saw him out of the corner of his eye and turned to look only when it was clear something was up. Lavogner stood in the doorway of his office, one hand on the doorknob, his eyes darting left and right as he scanned the bullpen. "What's with the captain?" said Delgado. "Heat stroke, maybe?" "Hopper!" Lavogner jabbed a meaty finger in Hopper's direction before ducking back into his office and sitting behind his desk. The door left open. "Why do I have a feeling this is bad?" Hopper asked. Before standing and heading over to the office, he stopped at the door and the captain waved him in immediately. "Close the door," said Lavogner, clasping his hands in his lap and staring intently at the blotter on his desk, rather than at his detective. Hopper hesitated, wary of the captain's mood, then complied with the request. "Take a seat, detective," said Lavogner, again not looking up. Hopper moved to stand behind one of the 2 chairs that were positioned in front of the captain's desk. He laid his hands on the fuzzy blue fabric, his fingers sticky with sweat. "This news I need to sit down for?" Lavogner looked up. "I don't have time for games, detective. Take a seat or stand, I don't care. And I don't have time to care. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, and most certainly not today." Hopper bit his bottom lip, then swung around the chair and sat down. "Is this something about the case? Delgado and I were just..." Lavogner closed his eyes and slowly shook his massive head from side to side. Hopper stopped talking. "Ah, okay. You say I a lot, detective." "Well, I mean..." The captain held up her hand. "There is no case, detective. Not anymore." Hopper blinked. He took a breath in, held it, and looked around his office. Had he missed something? Had there been a breakthrough? New information? New evidence? Something found at the 3rd crime scene? Had someone been caught? Confessed? These and 100 other questions began to circulate around his head. Hopper let his breath out slowly, readjusted himself in the chair, suddenly aware of how his shirt was plastered against the small of his back with sweat. He evidently settled for the most obvious question that came to mind. "What?" "No case, detective. As of now, the card homicides are off our board." Hopper adjusted his seating again. "What happened? Did we get new information? Somebody get a break?" Lavogner said nothing. He just looked at Hopper and once again slowly turned his head left to right, left to right, all the while not taking his eyes off the detective. Hopper opened his mouth to say something else, but that was when the office door was open, without a knock. Hopper turned in his seat, expecting to see Delgado joining them. She may have been a junior detective, but this was her case too. What he saw instead was a uniformed officer holding the door open as a man in a dark blue suit stepped swiftly inside. The uniform raised her eyebrow at Lord Wagner, but the captain just sighed and waved her away. She retreated, pulling the door closed. The man in the blue suit placed his briefcase down flat on the captain's desk and, not even acknowledging the presence of either police officer, began to thumb the revolving combination locks on the latches. Hopper watched him, his jaw hanging. He looked at the captain, who merely met his eye and shook his head, once more with exaggerated slowness. Hopper watched the man fuss with the briefcase. He was average in just about every way, perhaps a touch on the lean side, and had one of those faces whose age was impossible to tell. Outside of a rough estimate of 40 to 50. He was clean-shaven, and his hair was very short and very dark, and was plastered down with tonic and parted in the middle. The trails of fine tooth comb evidence with almost mathematical geometry. He had thin lips that were pressed into a white line of concentration as he worked on the combination locks. His suit was narrow and full of square edges. The trousers straight, like the ensemble was fresh off the rack. 1967, not 1977. Hopper had seen this type before. He was a lawyer, or some other kind of official from the district attorney's office. Perhaps even from the state. A man who kept his office tidy to the point where you weren't sure anyone actually worked there. Hopper could imagine the row of mechanical pencils and ballpoint pens lined up along the man's desk next to the correction fluid, because the man in the blue suit looked exactly like the kind of automatron who would devote all his energy to making his reports true and accurate and without typo or blemish. A desk jockey, a career desk jockey, and proud of it. Someone whose sole purpose was to make the lives of New York City's finest a lot harder than they really should be. Hopper disliked him already, and the man hadn't even spoken. "You need help there?" he asked, nodding at the briefcase. "You tried 111 yet?" At that, the latches of the briefcase snapped open with a sound that echoed around the office like a gunshot. Apparently satisfied, the man in the blue suit stood tall and gave a tight smile, although it was clear it was intended for his own enjoyment and nobody else's. "Gentlemen," he said, giving a court nod to the captain and then to Hopper. "Ah, excuse me," said Hopper, "but who the hell are you?" The man turned his tight smile on Hopper. He had blue eyes that matched his suits, and there was a faint trail of sweat on his upper lip. Ah, so he was human after all. Lavogner cleared his throat and gestured to the newcomer. This is Special Agent Gullop. He is here to oversee the transition of your case to his department. Hopper frowned deeply and nodded in mocking appreciation. Ah, okay. Right, good. He looked up at the Agent Gullop. And what department would that be, Special Agent Gullop? Gullop's smile tightened. If that were possible. That information is on a need-to-know basis, officer. Hopper gave the man a tight smile of his own. Detective. I'm sorry, said Gullop. He turned to Lavogner. The ins and outs of this police department, he said. And then he shrugged, like he really truly did not care. Hopper felt his temperature rising, and not just because of the clammy heat of the office. He stood, pushing himself up on the arms of the chair. He took a step closer to Gullop. He was nearly a head taller than the agents. Listen, friend, said Hopper. I don't know who you are, or what gives you the right to just waltz into our precinct and into my captain's office, but you're trending on some thin ice here. Gullop looked up at Hopper, the smile firmly plastered on his face. Hopper watched the pulse in the man's temple. We've been working on this case for 6 weeks now, Hopper continued. We're making progress. We can handle it. So I'm sorry, Special Agent, but I'm not going to let some G-man in a fancy suit just come in and take her over. Gullop licked his lips. Hopper continued to stare down at him, but it was having no effect. Gullop would not be intimidated. His calm, almost placid exterior remained entirely unrippled. Finally he nodded. I understand your concerns, Detective, but the case is no longer yours. He glanced at Lavogner, who hadn't moved a single muscle as he sat behind his desk. Nor is it the concern of anybody employed by New York City Police Department. We are taking this case from you. He paused and looked back at Hopper. You can wipe it off that blackboard of yours. He glanced at Lavogner again. Actually, that blackboard is a good idea. The way you list cases and detectives, I might borrow that. It could be useful back at the office. And which office is that? Asked Hopper. I am not at liberty to say, Mr. Hopper. Detective Hopper. Sorry, Detective Hopper. Gullop looked at the captain again. Sorry, I'm terrible at titles. Your organisation is so... He waved his hands in the air. Hierarchical. Hopper sighed and turned to the captain. He leaned over the desk, elbows locked. Captain, what is going on here? This is bullshit. Lavogner sighed and rubbed his face. After a moment of apparent thought, he loosened his tie at the collar and undid the top button of his uniform shirt. This time, however, the action made Hopper smile. He stood back and folded his arms. Here we go. Special Agent Gullop, said the captain. I understand why you are here, and my superiors have ordered me to give you the fullest cooperation, which I am happy to provide. But perhaps, if you could give us just a little more information, we might be able to expedite the things for you just a little? Gollop nodded. Of course. He opened the briefcase. Hopper got a quick look inside, but all he could see was a single brown manila folder, which Gollop pulled out and handed to him. Hopper took it and looked at the blank cover. Gollop sat down, then gestured to the other chair. Please. Hopper sighed again and sat down. He opened the folder. Inside was a thin sheaf of papers, stapled at the corner. On the top was a form of some kind. In the top corner was a photocopied picture of a man that was such bad quality it took Hopper a few seconds to recognise before he read the name underneath. It was the third victim, Jacob Howler. The form adding the middle initial T. The address matched the crime scene. The rest of the sheet seemed to be some kind of official record of service, but half of the text had been redacted underneath thick black lines. Hopper turned the sheet over and saw more of the same. There were a few lines of text readable, but with no context. About the only thing that made sense was another address. Special Agent Gollop neatly arranged his hands on his lap as he crossed one knee over another. Your third victim was Jacob Howler, he said. We know, said Hopper. What you don't know, Detective, is that Jacob Howler is one of ours, Special Agent Jacob Howler. He was working on assignments, and the fact that he was killed in the course of his duties is of primary concern to my department. Therefore, we need to be sure that at most thorough investigation is carried out. In order to ensure that happens, we would be taking the case in-house. Hopper shook his head. That's not how it works, he said. If you work for federal law enforcement, you can submit a formal request, or you can just ask nicely and we can cooperate. But what you can't do is just come in here and tell us to stop work. I don't care who you work for. That's not how it works. Gollop's smile returned, tightened by several degrees. He looked up at Hopper and turned to Lavogna. Do all your detectives have such a chip on their shoulder? Only the good ones, said the captain. Gollop adjusted himself in his chair, swapping one cross leg for another as he half turned to face Hopper. In point of fact, I have full authority to just walk in here and take a case away from you. I have legal power to order the NYPD to surrender any and all case files and documentation pertaining to the case in question. And furthermore, I have the authority to disbar the NYPD from any further action on said case. And further to that, I have the ability to lay charges as I see fit, which may include obstruction of justice. He lifted one wrist and adjusted the square cufflink so it was lined up exactly parallel to the edge of the shirt cuff. He then looked back at Hopper. Do we have an understanding, Detective Hopper? Hopper ran his fingers through his hair. He looked at the captain, but Lavogna just shook his head again. My hands are tied. My hands are tied, Hopper. This comes from the Chief of Detectives himself. When I got the call, Special Agent Gullop and his men were already on their way. He sat back in his chair and spread his hands. There's nothing we can do. This case is no longer ours. Hopper frowned. Men? The office door flew open and Delgado burst in. She took one look at the trio. Then her gaze settled on the captain. What the hell is going on, sir? They're taking everything. Hopper jumped to his feet and moved to the office windows. Looking out across the bullpen, he saw two men in dark suits busy loading casework from his and Delgado's twin desks into large file boxes, while a third agent seemed to be having a very one-sided conversation with Sergeant McGowan. In that, McGowan was yelling at him, and the agent wasn't saying a thing. You gotta be kidding me, said Hopper. He left the office. Delgado closed behind. As he got to his desk, the agent being given an earful by McGovern looked over at him. The sergeant stopped midstream and turned around. Hopper, what's going on, man? These bozos say nothing. And who's that with the captain? Hopper turned as Lavagna approached, Special Agent Gullop at his elbow. Behind them stood Delgado, fuming, her arms folded. That'll do, Sergeant, said the captain. Gullop smiled, and Hopper had to dampen his sudden and urgent desire to wipe the expression from the man's face. The special agent glanced sideways at Lavagna. This another one of your good ones, Captain? Lavagna ignored him. He stepped between Sergeant McGowan and the other agents. Around them, the other detectives in the bullpen watched. The captain moved around his sergeant to address the room. Nothing we can do, everybody. Best you just let them get on with it and get out. In the meantime, we still have police work to do, so I suggest we do it. Murmuring, the other detectives returned to their desks, although Hopper could see that few were really returning to their work. Delgado stormed over to her desk, removing her coffee mug before the agents clearing her desk swept it up into his carton. Case fouls, idiot, she muttered. Lavagna tapped Hopper on the arm. Go get some coffee and come back in 5. They'll be done by then. And then what? They'll have cleaned us out. What do you want me to do, detective? Call Beam at City Hall and ask for a favour? Trust me, he's busy. We all are. Or maybe you've forgotten the other cases on the board with your name next to them? He paused and sighed. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe the card homicides were too big for this precinct to handle. Maybe I would have called in the feds anyway. With that, the captain stalked off back to his office. He closed the door behind him. Hopper turned back to watch the agents continuing their packing. They were slow, methodical, and, Delgado's coffee mug aside, they did seem to be checking the files before they loaded them into their boxes, making sure they took the card homicide material and nothing else. Standing nearby, the I take case swinging in one hand. Special Agent Scallop conferred with deferred agents. Hopper turned and headed toward the coffee room. As he passed Delgado, she tapped his elbow. He glanced at her and she gestured with a nod of her head in the direction he was already facing. Holding her mug, she walked ahead of him. Once they were in the coffee room, Hopper closed the door behind him, and as Delgado moved to the window and looked back down the hallway toward the bullpen. In the corner of the room sat a 14-inch black and white television set, on but with the sound muted. Hopper twisted the volume control just as Vicki Lawrence began extolling the virtues of Carnation instant milk. Happy that they now wouldn't be overheard, Hopper turned to his partner. "You okay, Delgado?" "This is bullshit," she said. Hopper nodded. "Sure is." "But," said Delgado, turning around to face her partner, "I have an idea." Okay, folks, so that is the end of the chapter. So, I hope you are as well. I'm quite enjoying this. It's getting very interesting. These murders, how the victims are killed in the same way. So, yeah, it's quite addictive. This, to be honest, I'm really enjoying it. I hope you are as well. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Do let me know if you prefer me doing this, these sort of videos like this, where it's just audio, because as you can probably tell, I've got a mic on and you can hear me better. And because I've got a mic on with the wire, it's a bit awkward to position my phone to look at me, because I might pull it over the wire or something, not have enough room or whatever, so it might get a bit awkward like that. But do let me know if you prefer it this way, or if you want me to just go back to the old way and film myself, film me ugly mug. No, I'm joking. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this video. Until next time, take it easy, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Hello there, fellow gamers. My name is Ashes and I welcome you all to the channel. Now, just a quick one before we start the reading. After this clip, it's going to be it's not going to be any picture. It's just going to be a black screen, because this video I've got my mic plugged into my phone, so you're going to hear me a lot better. It's going to be a better sound while I'm reading, but the phone's going to be facing down, filming the ground, so it's just going to be a black screen. So it's going to be like an audio thing. Maybe it might be better. Let me know what you think in the comments. But yeah, let's get to the reading.